Welcome everybody to episode 7 of the Walk in My Shoes series. Today we have opened up the discussion to non-members, and so I just want to take a quick few minutes, well seconds hopefully, to introduce Philanthropy Impact before we begin for those who don't know us yet. We are a membership organisation and our vision is to increase and improve philanthropy and social investment across borders, sectors and causes. We work with professional advisors to ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals to grow and enhance the quality of support they give to their clients, the UK's wealthiest individuals around philanthropy and social impact investing. We also act as a knowledge hub and centre of excellence, offering events, specialist knowledge sharing, training, voluntary standards and sector and government liaison. So we've put together this Walk in My Shoes series for us to bring together everybody in a place of safe collaboration where we can talk about the effects of COVID-19 on the philanthropy and social impact investment space. Today we're talking about philanthropic efforts in Asia to battle the COVID-19 crisis. Please use the chat for questions and we will do our best to get them answered. Anything that isn't answered we will then transfer into the LinkedIn group. There's a link to that in the chat right now, or you had it in the invite for the email, that you had. I'm sorry, it's my Monday morning brain. Today we are talking about the philanthropic efforts in Asia, so it's with great pleasure that I get to welcome Laurence Lien, co-founder and CEO of the Asia Philanthropy Circle, Ruth Shapiro, the Chief Executive at the Centre for Asian Philanthropy and Society, Dorothy Chan, who is Head of Philanthropy Advisory and Charitable Services at the Asian Pacific HSBC, and Vivien, who is Managing Partner of Vivien & Co LLP and our Advisory Board Member of AVPN, during a conversation with John Pepin, our CEO, about the endeavour of Asia philanthropy during this time of uncertainty and how we can learn from each other. So I will now pass over to John, who's going to do a much better job than me this morning. Sorry, John.
No guarantees. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone in Asia. Good morning, everyone in Europe. Thank you for joining us. We have 30 minutes to discuss this topic. Very quickly, how has your life been affected so far by the COVID virus? Laurence.
Oh, too much. Getting cabin fever already at home. We are having our own version of lockdown called Circuit Breaker. It was supposed to have ended after 4 weeks, but it got extended 2 weeks ago for another 4 weeks, and I hope that's the end of it. But I think life will not go back to normal anytime soon, unfortunately, and we have to plan for that.
Here in Hong Kong, we're a bit more fortunate in the sense that sensible practices by all our citizens and our fellow humanity. We've been practicing social distancing, and I believe if we go into town today, activities are almost back to normal. So in terms of business continuity planning, this is a great test for everybody, for all sector. But I think we are very fortunate here, and let Ruth and Vivien supplement.
Okay, thank you. Ruth.
Well, I need to echo, of course, what Dorothy said, and I'm sure Vivien will agree. I was in the United States and people, my family and friends said, how could you possibly go back to Hong Kong? And now it looks so prescient because this is really one of the best places to be in the world. And we have had 0 cases for 5 or 6 days now, new cases. So people are getting back to work. Everyone is wearing masks. Everyone is really very thoughtful about each other. And I think that, one of the tiny little silver linings of this global catastrophe has been the amount of humanity that has been shown at the local level here and everywhere in the world.
Thank you. That reminds me of a quote that I used last week, which is from Camus, his definition of heroism: ordinary people doing extraordinary things out of simple decency. Vivien, how are you doing?
Well, Yeah, I have to echo what Dorothy and Ruth said. I think we are very thankful that Hong Kong, we have no new cases for a week, and other than people wearing masks, I think the city is coming back alive. That's very encouraging. I think one key message for everyone maybe throughout this period is having to adapt and respond quickly, because it really has been very different, and each day there are new developments. And so at the individual level, how we work, and also in terms of what we need to respond through our work, our organization, and also the nature of the projects that we've been involved in. It has been a key theme of adapting throughout. And I think John knows that I was in London and I came back to Hong Kong, so I have had quite interesting perspectives across, So, but it's good to be here, and I think that Hong Kong, clearly demonstrate that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So,
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laurence. What are some of your major concerns as chief executive of the Asia Philanthropy Circle and of the circle itself?
Well, let me start with the positive, which is a flood of support from philanthropists and from volunteers to help out with the crisis or the impact of the crisis. But that is also the concern, right? Because everybody's attention is taken by the crisis. And a lot of other things like education, other causes, climate change has really taken a back seat. There's a lot of funding available now for COVID-related matters. And I think a lot are bringing forward the expenditure that the funding that they would have been using for the rest of the year, or maybe even a few years ahead, right? And the fear is that the funding will dry up at a time when we are going to be left with even more serious issues: the unemployment rate going skyrocketing, livelihoods issues. Inequality is definitely in the forefront because the less able, the lower income are disproportionately hit by this, and it will be even worse in the aftermath, depending on how many waves of infections we're going to get. So I worry about not now. I mean, the response has been great, but the future. And of course, I think a lot of people are concerned about the state and health of the NGO sector. How many NGOs will not survive this, because we depend on them to do the work for the future, and especially the hard work that's coming up.
Really interesting, because it's the same issues here, and I think internationally. What is the in a very short answer? What is the Asian Philanthropy Circle doing to address the issues you've just articulated?
Yeah. So I mean, we have been doing things that we never thought would happen, right? Months ago, bringing our members together online, on webinars that are oversubscribed. If we were to do that 2 months ago, I would have said maybe 5 would turn up, but dozens turn up for these online sort of dialogues where we connect with one another to do. One is to focus on the immediate tasks. I mean, there's still a lot that's needed to be done. But also thinking ahead of and not forgetting the issues. So we've had online dialogue on education, right? Because I guess some are going back to school, but at one point, 1.6 billion of kids were out of school and supposed to be learning at home. But in countries where 90% are off are not on the internet, that's not possible, right? And so how do we deal with these issues that are a bit off the radar? And also we are starting to focus on the longer term issues of livelihoods already.
Thank you very much. Ruth, what trends are there in philanthropy and CSR do you see across Asia due to the COVID-19?
Thank you, John. Well, I'd like to talk about 4 trends. And the first one I actually don't need to talk about because it's what Laurence just talked about, which is the zero-sum nature of where funds are going now, whether they're coming from philanthropists or CSR. And the question's going to be, post-COVID, will, when companies and individuals are hurting due to a international recession at the mildest or depression, what will happen with those funds, and what will it mean for the nonprofit and the social sector. But the second trend I want to talk about is the real critical importance of community-based efforts. So, those of us operating in the world of philanthropy have been used to, in the last few years, really talking about scale and change at a very big level. And during this COVID crisis, when we're all affected, what's really been meaningful on the ground are community-based efforts, are neighbor helping neighbor, are very local grassroots NGOs working with local government and local aspects of businesses to come together to meet, to help people get food and drink and housing and medicine. And so it really goes back to, dare I mention Hillary Clinton, it takes a village. It really does take grassroots effort and village level and community effort still, and we see that very much flourishing throughout the region. The third would be that those organizations that already have an internet, essentially business model, an internet-based business model, whether they're nonprofits or social enterprises, are able to continue doing their work, obviously. Educational efforts that are online are thriving during this. But if you don't have an internet or web-based application in your business model, you're in trouble. And so we're seeing those divisions happening among social delivery organizations. And lastly, I just want to say that I think governments are going to call upon companies, the companies that are still up and running after this, to unprecedented levels. Already across Asia, we see governments requiring companies, or shaming and blaming companies, or creating separate funds for companies that are going to, in effect, make them give toward societal challenges in ways that they haven't had to give before, and in amounts that they may not have given before. And that's going to be a continuing trend.
Okay, thank you very much. Dorothy, what are some of the major concerns facing your clients right now as a banker? Is it all around how they can keep their wealth, or are they looking also at dealing with societal issues?
Thanks, John. Well, let me start off with a little profile of our clients. They tend to be entrepreneurs or large owners of large enterprises. So for them, this crisis really hit them at the heart. So on the one hand, they had to worry about their business continuity. And on the other hand, they're also concerned about the impact of the crisis on their families, on their employees. So in a way, they're both tackling both the how do you keep the business running, and the other hand, what can I do for the community? And it's pretty interesting to see how they're bringing their business discipline to the way to their response in terms of helping community. Ruth is absolutely right. They want to know exactly what is going on the ground. They watch TV news, see clips or stories about people suffering, and they will come to us and ask, is this really true? Who can I give to? So we have seen increases in terms of queries about how can I help? Because this is a crisis that they've never seen before. And then on the other hand, they are also bringing their discipline to planning for their giving. So they're looking into whether their investment strategies will generate the income required for all the commitments they've made previously, and how to respond to additional requests, because everybody is pretty clear that these are unusual times. They need to give a lot more to support the recovery. And so they know that it's not business as usual. So some are being more flexible in the way they give, not just financially, but also in time and leveraging their own resources. I know individuals who are using their private jet to deliver supplies. So they actually they're showing the best of humanity during this crisis. And then the last part is also the way they're giving. Here in Asia, we're slightly ahead of developments with the rest of the world. if we have this conversation in February, a number of my clients is asking us about local relief measure. Where can I donate hand masks? Where can I donate sanitizers? And then we also get a number of research. Who can I fund in the area of vaccine development? And so we've been channeling a lot of funds to within Hong Kong and also in Greater China. And now I'm getting a lot more about cross-border giving. Who can I give to in India? How can I help the situation in Africa? And also, how can I help the unemployed or underemployed in Hong Kong? So a lot of folks are thinking about recovery now. And so as advisors, we have to be very agile, have our ears on the ground, and be able to mobilize quite quickly.
Are you getting a sense that giving is actually increasing, or is it just stable as it was before?
It's I believe it's probably slightly stable because everything averages out, right? I have individuals who decide to establish COVID relief fund. These individuals have given up their whole year's salary. We're still talking about a few million US dollars. That has never happened before, but they know that they need to take such steps. But on the other hand, I still have clients who are a bit more conservative. They are still sticking with, I've given X amount this year based on the income from my investments. If it's shrink this year, I would just have to be slightly more prudent in terms of assessing projects. So I think overall it will average out.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a lot of questions coming in, but before we start to address some of those, Vivien, the crisis, what pressures are you seeing directly on philanthropists in dealing with this? We had someone on last week who is a millennial, wealthy millennial, who is stuck at home and trying to deal with the as a philanthropist with the multiple asks that are coming her way on how does she set priorities, et cetera, et cetera. What are you seeing are the pressures of philanthropists in your area?
Well, hi, thanks, John. Very happy to kind of contribute what we're seeing. And I have to echo what you just said there. And I think because of the disruptive nature and the unprecedented circumstances brought by the virus outbreak, I think the challenge is how to meet the kind of the immediate and urgent needs. And the needs are evolving. And I think perspectives could be different for grantors or grantees or foundations. For example, it could be outside the agreed scope of fund or outside the agreed scope of or established objects or a foundation. And for a grant or grantee, this could be outside the agreed scope of the use of funds. So I think there is certainly, as I said earlier, the need to adapt and to look at how the extent to which the existing mandate for the funds or for the foundation can meet the urgent needs. And I think this is challenging because there is still a need to balance the original commitments and also to look ahead to new challenges that may arise. And depending on how a grant is set up or a foundation is set up, that there are practical realities whether there will be sufficient flexibility. But to the extent possible, hopefully, and we see that there would be room for some way of adapting. To be flexible enough to deal with the changes. And I think this is where collaboration is very important because different foundations may have very set objects. And I think in Hong Kong, for example, you would get your objects approved by the Inland Revenue Department. And you then have to see whether, what you're seeking to do, the relief that you're seeking to provide would fall within that. So we're involved in some projects, for example, looking at the foundation and see whether their mandate extends to donating medical equipment. And if not, then they may have to look at collaborating with some other partners to find the way to work together to provide the needed relief. So I think having to adapt and to adopt some level of flexibility within the mandate or having to renegotiate are the pressure points. But there's need to kind of take a medium and longer term view to evolve, to adapt to continuing evolving challenges. But at the same time, I think this is where a proper corporate governance and a due process in the organizations, whether it's grantee level or at the grant level, would be very important to deal with this, so that there would be framework that's continue to be built on in place for meeting the new and unexpected challenges that may arise further down the line. Thank
you. I'm going to go to a question that's come in because it's seemed to be repeated a couple of times. So someone from asking a question about Indonesia, but there's been similar questions about Cambodia and Nepal, etc. So the question is, can you advise us as a local Bali-based Indonesian NGO how to best approach potential philanthropic donors, knowing that the whole world is facing serious challenges, to raise funds to provide food and hygiene, sanitation packages to our 171 remote village students who are all in lockdown and working from paper handouts as we have no internet access, but need their health and spirits up. And you're getting similar questions about approaching funders in other areas. Who would like to address that? Laurence, do you want to tackle that first?
Okay, a lot of philanthropists and foundations can be a little bit removed from the ground. I mean, as Ruth said, you need very strong community-based ground-up effort, because different people are hurting in very different ways, and which you can't imagine because there's very little data and research on it. And in fact, I mean, there's a lot of money going on, and in fact, the lack of coordination is really perplexing for foundations, for philanthropists, in terms of knowing really where to give. And something that you feel is needed, overnight can be a non-issue because many people have suddenly given to that area. So if an intermediary exists in your community, I would work with an intermediary who can bridge the demand and supply. Are there people who are taking on, and I would plead with people who can play this role. Your services of coordination is extremely critical at this stage. To help the people who can provide resources and people who demand it to play that matching role because of how it's evolving. So for example, in Singapore, AVPC is playing a role with migrant workers, which is our big issue right now. If we didn't have them, it'll be very confusing for donors. APC is taking on the task with our members, right? So that's one. Two, I think you have to do some advocacy to show what is happening on the ground, because we may know the issues on a normal peacetime crisis, but this is so different. We really, it's very hard to know. I mean, certainly for me sitting in Singapore, I have no idea what's happening. There's very little information on what's happening in Indonesia, which is just next to us, or let alone India or Nepal. So some advocacy on what's really happening to the ground and bringing that to the donors and the philanthropists is quite important at this stage. And of course, if you can link it to COVID, whatever is happening, you have to do that, because.
John, I can add something here if you like.
Yeah, okay. Laurence?
Yes?
Okay, sorry, you muted. Okay, yes, Ruth, go ahead.
I want to say a few things. First of all, I agree with Laurence. The organizations that are playing coordinating roles are few and far between and absolutely essential. In Indonesia, unfortunately, I don't know of one that's working across the entire archipelago. And you mentioned Myanmar and Nepal. In Nepal, the Chaudhry Foundation is doing really great work in terms of coordinating. And in Myanmar, Max Myanmar is taking on that role to a certain extent. So I would encourage whoever the writers to get in touch with those organizations. I also think that a lot is happening around crowdfunding. So if you can get your voice onto the internet through a crowdfunding site, and there are, in effect, amalgamators crowdfunding initiatives, I would say go for it, because there are a number of different crowdfunding sites that are directing funding toward different organizations. I also think that you have to work with the local government entity. A lot of times, I'm sorry, did he tell me to stop?
No.
Okay. Local government is playing a really important role here, and they can essentially get your concerns up the flagpost to the next level. I want to just give a little plug for our newsletter called Who's Doing Good, which is available for free if you sign up on our website, and it goes through many different initiatives that are being taken by corporations and philanthropists throughout Asia, including Laurence Lien very generously providing a great deal of support highlighted in our newsletter. So please take a look at that, and you may see names of organizations that you can connect to in your own locality.
Dorothy, does the bank advisors provide any general information about how people, like the person who's asked the question, can reach out to people, or do you provide information, or do you have connections with groups that might coordinate some of this stuff?
We definitely provide information directly to clients, and so for those who are eager to be matched with potential donors, feel free to reach out. And I would also like to build on something that Ruth mentioned earlier about I know bandwidth is limited, but at the same time, given who my client profile is, a lot of them are dependent on visual image. So Ruth mentioned that we have to have some internet-based a business model. Somehow, the social media has to be, you have to leverage that. And given times like this, a number of the platform providers, Facebook, Instagram, are giving out free placements or free ads to NGOs. So that's a great resource to tap into. Unfortunately, in the news cycle, or just giving how big the crisis is, a number of individuals are focused within their own community first. And we need those other images to show them, okay, we're now in a decent stage in Hong Kong. We can, let's look into the wider world beyond it. And the most effective way to reach out donors really is through Facebook post or anything you can share on WhatsApp.
Okay, thank you. There's only 3 minutes left. Vivien,
John, can I add something?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Yeah, John, okay, I just thought to share, as a member of the Board of Advisors of Asia Venture Philanthropy Network, I'll just mention that, philanthropy really has to adapt during this time, and AVPN has, and so, for example, it will be hosting its virtual conference through this year, and it's on the topic of power of networks. And I would also encourage, I think there's really a need to learn and share experience, and so, John, I think your series of webinars certainly does that. And for Asia, I think AVPN has started a series of webinars on COVID-19 responses since early April. So perhaps if people are interested, could have a look at AVPN website. And really, I think we started the first one on North Asia responses, and you can see those jurisdictions which were earlier on along the journey could share, and then the subsequent jurisdictions could kind of pick up on some of that knowledge and really see how the needs evolve from the initial medical healthcare, food provision, to livelihoods, to employment issues. Yeah, so have a look at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so 2 minutes. There is a piece of software now that's being looked at here in the UK, which is international, which in effect someone who needs funding puts it on that software, and then funders can come on and make choices. And there are already some due diligence, minimal due diligence been done. I'll send you the link so you can see it, and if you want more information, just let me know. Okay, now we have 1 minute, so going around the table, any final last words, keeping in mind we have 60 seconds. Laurence.
Well, I would urge, if it's for philanthropists to look at the longer term issues, I mentioned livelihoods, I also like to mention about economic model for the future. that would make us more resilient, to future crises and to lessening the impact on vulnerable people. I hope there is actually a lot of interest in these issues now, but I hope it doesn't just quickly go back to life as normal when post-COVID.
Okay, thank you. Ruth.
Well, the expression that's been going around lately is never put a good catastrophe to waste. And I echo that sentiment. I really hope that everyone listening to this and everyone who is in all of our respective networks use this catastrophe and this situation to make a better world. And there is glimmers of hope there that give one a feeling of optimism, and it's good to see.
Good. Dorothy.
I concur with what Laurence and Ruth mentioned. This is a time for us to think about how we want to rebuild communities. And for philanthropists, I think there's an even greater stake for them because governments have huge public deficits. Community groups are tapped to very thin. So this is a chance for everybody to shine and bring some hope to build a better world.
Okay, great. Vivien.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with what's been said by fellow panelists. I think certainly the message, would be to build hope and resilience. I think I talked about adapting, and I talk about collaborating. So I think, we can't overemphasize this, especially dealing with unprecedented situation. But certainly, I think it would be to build hope and resilience. And so one of the things that we can look at and learn from this is whether there are improvements to our infrastructure that we could have in place, so that it will be more robust and dynamic to be able to deal with this kind of situation again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've run out of time. Thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we can do a follow-up event on this topic. There have been a lot of questions come through, and we only managed to ask one, but it was actually asked multiple people asked for it. So thank you for doing this, and over to you, Sophia.
Yeah, just to echo John, thank you very much. Thank you all. Please do get in touch in the LinkedIn group. Hopefully most of our panelists will be able to join us there as well. And I posted in the chat what upcoming topics there are. And if you have anything that you'd like to suggest for topics, please get in touch with me at the email address or via LinkedIn. Thank you all. Have a lovely day.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.